The Selvar fleet hovered over Earth, a wall of black metal stretching across the sky. 10,000 warships, each larger than a city, blocked out the stars. The invasion was about to begin. On the bridge of the flagship, Eternal Dominion, Supreme Commander Vor stood with his hands behind his back, his golden armor reflecting the soft glow of the holographic war table. The battle plans were displayed before him, a perfectly calculated strategy to crush humanity in less than a day. His officers waited for his order. Vor's lips curled into a smirk. "One planet," he said, his deep voice filled with amusement. "They only have one planet, and they actually think they can defend it." The officers laughed. The Selvar Empire had conquered hundreds of worlds. They had crushed civilizations that spread across multiple solar systems. Earth was nothing to them. "Begin the assault," Vor commanded. The first wave of attack ships descended, their engines screaming as they cut through the atmosphere. Plasma cannons charged, targeting Earth's major cities: New York, Beijing, Moscow, London. In moments, the world would be in flames. But something was wrong. The ships lost communication the moment they entered the lower atmosphere. The holographic screens flickered, displaying static. "What's happening?" Vor barked. An officer struggled to regain control. "Sir, the ships, they've disappeared." Vor's eyes narrowed. "Destroyed." The officer swallowed hard. "No, sir. They just vanished. No debris. No distress signals. It's like they were never there." Vor's smirk vanished. "Send the second wave." More Excelvar ships descended, scanning the area where the first fleet had disappeared. Then something moved. At first, it looked like clouds shifting, a natural phenomenon. But the Excelvar had studied Earth's weather patterns, and this was not normal. The clouds swirled, turning darker. Lightning crackled, but it wasn't blue. It was red, unnatural, like veins running through the sky. Then the screams began. The second wave of ships stopped moving. Their engines failed midair. They hovered silently, trapped. On board, the Selvar soldiers saw something impossible. The ground beneath them opened. It wasn't an explosion. It wasn't an earthquake. The land itself shifted, stretching into the sky like living tendrils. Shadows twisted, forming massive hands that reached up and dragged the ships down. The officers on Eternal Dominion watched in horror. The warships, their unstoppable war machines, were being pulled into the ground, swallowed whole without a single shot fired. And then silence. Vor clenched his fists. Impossible. He turned to his lead strategist. "I want answers. Now." The strategist's face was pale. "Commander, I don't think we are fighting humans." Vor felt something cold creep into his chest. The Excelvar had never feared war. But this was not war. This was a warning. And they had already lost the first battle. Panic spread across the Eternal Dominion's command deck like wildfire. The screens that once displayed Selvar superiority now showed nothing but static and silence. 10,000 warships had come to conquer Earth, yet hundreds were already missing without a trace. "Where is my army?" Supreme Commander Vor growled, slamming his armored fist onto the war table. His officers flinched but had no answers. A communications officer's trembling voice broke the tense silence. "Commander, we received one last transmission before the second wave vanished." "Play it." The room filled with a garbled transmission. Screams, the sound of metal tearing apart. And then, a voice. "They are watching us. They were never sleeping. Leave before." The message cut off. A deep, unsettling silence followed. Vor refused to believe this was fear. That Selvar had crushed entire civilizations. They were the strongest empire in the galaxy. And yet, Earth had done nothing. No weapons, no counterattack. The planet had simply taken his soldiers. "Send in the ground forces," Vor ordered. "I want control over their capital cities. Now." The officer hesitated. "Sir, our scans show Unusual activity on the surface. Vor's patience snapped. Define unusual. The officer hesitated, then brought up a live feed. The entire American East Coast was now covered in a thick, swirling black fog that moved unnaturally against the wind. In Beijing, massive cracks in the ground pulsed with an eerie red glow. In London, entire districts had gone silent, and buildings had collapsed inward as if something had sucked them into the earth. And still, no enemy fire. It wasn't war. It was as if the planet itself was eating them. Vor turned away from the screen. Deploy the legions. Full invasion. Now. Thousands of drop pods rained from the sky, slamming into Earth's surface. Elite Selvar warriors, armored and armed with plasma rifles and disruptor blades, stormed out. They expected human resistance. Instead, they found nothing. Cities were empty, the streets eerily silent. Vehicles sat abandoned, doors hanging open. There were no human bodies, no signs of struggle. It was as if Earth's population had simply vanished before they even arrived. The soldiers advanced cautiously. Their helmets displayed life sign detectors, yet the readings made no sense. Millions of heartbeats pulsed just beneath their feet. Then the whispers began. Not through their radios, not from their commanders. The whispers came from inside their helmets, soft, unnatural voices that spoke their names, even though no human had ever known them. One soldier screamed and fired his weapon at nothing. Others backed away, their unbreakable discipline cracking. Then the ground moved. What had once been solid asphalt and concrete shifted like liquid, pulling soldiers downward as if the streets themselves were alive. Vor, watching from orbit, saw his best warriors disappear from the trackers, one by one. There were no gunfights, no explosions, just vanishing. The great Selvar Empire had faced countless enemies, but never a planet that fought back like this. And Vor was starting to understand a terrifying truth. Earth was never just a planet. Supreme Commander Vor stared at the holographic war map, watching as the Selvar invasion force disappeared. Not defeated, not destroyed, just gone. This is not possible, Vor muttered, his golden eyes narrowing. The Selvar Empire had crushed countless civilizations, some with planets 10 times larger than Earth. And yet, this tiny world was winning, without firing a single shot. A trembling officer approached. Commander, we've lost contact with over 60% of our ground forces. No distress calls. No bodies. They just vanished. Vor clenched his fists. Send in more dropships. Full deployment. I want control over this planet. The order was given. Thousands more Selvar warriors descended from the fleet, landing in every major city, heavily armed, highly trained, ready for battle. But battle never came. The streets of Earth were still empty. No humans, no resistance, just silence. Then the soldiers heard it. A low, inhuman hum vibrated through the air. Their advanced helmets failed to filter it out. It sank into their minds, sending chills through their alien bodies. And then, from the shadows of the abandoned cities, they emerge. Not humans, something else. At first, the soldiers thought they were statues, tall, humanoid figures made of black stone, standing motionless in the streets, in doorways, on rooftops. They had no faces, no weapons, just empty eyes staring at them. Then one moved. A single step, then another. Then, they all turned their heads at the same time. The Selvar, for the first time in history, felt fear. One soldier panicked and fired his plasma rifle. The energy bolt hit the figure in the chest and was absorbed. The figure shuddered, then rushed forward with impossible speed. Screams echoed through the comm channels as the soldiers opened fire, but the weapons were useless. The black figures moved through the attacks, unharmed. Then the first soldier was touched. Just a single cold hand on his helmet. He froze mid-scream. His body hardened. His armor darkened. and in less than a second, he was one of them. One by one, the Excelvar transformed into the same faceless statues. Their bodies, their minds, their very existence was claimed by Earth itself. Vor saw the entire army stop moving on the war map. Not dead, not alive, just gone. The command deck was silent. No one spoke. Vor's second-in-command swallowed hard. "Commander, I don't think we are the ones conquering this world." Vor refused to accept it. Earth was just a planet. It was not alive. But the truth was staring at him. Earth was never meant to be conquered. And the Excelvar had already lost. Supreme Commander Vor's golden eyes burned with frustration as he watched his invasion force disappear, not in battle, not by human resistance, but by something else, something unnatural. The Excelvar had invaded countless worlds. This should have been easy. And yet, Earth had claimed thousands of his soldiers without firing a single shot. "Pull them back," Vor ordered, his voice sharp. "All remaining ground forces, retreat to the ships." But there was no response. Static filled the comm channels. The war map showed red dots blinking out, entire units vanishing in seconds. Then a single transmission came through, the voice, whispering and distorted. "You are not welcome here." Vor's blood ran cold. That was not a human voice. The officers on the command deck looked to him, fear in their eyes. These were hardened Excelvar warriors, conquerors of the galaxy. But now they were afraid. A navigator's voice trembled. "Commander, the fleet is moving." Vor turned sharply. "What?" "I gave no orders." "It's not a stir." The navigator's hands shook as he tapped at the controls. "Something is pulling the ships toward Earth." The entire bridge crew froze. Outside the massive windows of the flagship, Vor watched as the mighty fleet of 10,000 warships began descending. Slowly at first, then faster. Earth's gravity had changed. No, not gravity. Something was dragging them down. Alarms blared. Engines roared as pilots fought against the invisible force, but nothing worked. Then, one of the warships at the fleet's edge vanished. Not exploded, not shot down. It was just gone. The crew saw it. One moment, the battleship was there. The next, a swirling black mass reached out from the planet, wrapping around the ship like tendrils, and pulled it into the void. Screams echoed over the comms. Then, another ship vanished, and another. One by one, the fleet was being consumed. Vor clenched his fists. Fire everything. Bombard the planet. The fleet unleashed a storm of plasma, nuclear warheads, and planet-cracking weapons. The sky burned as explosions rained down on Earth. And then, the planet absorbed it. The fire, the shock waves, the destruction. It vanished on impact, as if the Earth itself was swallowing it whole. Then, the whispers returned. Not over the comms, inside their minds. A deep, inhuman voice echoed through Vor's skull. "You should not have come." Vor stumbled back, gripping his head. Around him, his officers screamed as the voice invaded their minds, filling them with visions of ancient creatures, not human, not Excelvar, something older, something that had been waiting. Vor gasped as he realized the truth. Earth was never just a planet. It was a prison. And they had just set something free. Panic filled the command deck. Alarms blared. Officers shouted, their voices cracking with fear. The fleet, the pride of the Excelvar Empire, was vanishing, ship by ship. Supreme Commander Vor couldn't believe what he was seeing. The planet below had turned into a black abyss, its surface shifting like liquid, pulling ships down one by one. He gritted his teeth. Break formation. Full retreat. Engines roared as thousands of Excelvar ships fought to escape, but the void below them only grew stronger. A captain's face appeared on the holoscreen, his golden skin drenched in sweat. "Commander, we're losing control of the flagship. Something." His transmission cut out. Vor barely had time to react before the ship was ripped apart, not by weapons, but by something unseen, a force that twisted metal like paper, swallowing the debris into the blackened earth below. Then the voice returned. "You should have never come." It was everywhere. Not on the comms, not through their technology. It was inside them. Officers collapsed, clutching their heads. Some screamed until their voices broke. Others simply froze, their eyes turning black, as if something had reached into their minds and stolen their souls. Vor's breath came in sharp gasps. He felt it too, a presence, watching him, waiting. And then he saw it. From the swirling abyss below, something began to rise. At first, it had no shape, just shifting, writhing darkness. Then it took form. A figure, towering, humanoid, but wrong. Its body was made of shadows, shifting and stretching like a living nightmare. No face, no eyes. But Vor felt its gaze pierce through him. It had been trapped here for eons, and the Excelvar had set it free. Vor stumbled back, his claws tightening into fists. He was a warrior, a conqueror. He would not bow to fear. He turned to his officers, those who remained standing. "Prepare the superweapon. If this thing wants a fight, we'll give it one." The Excelvar's most powerful weapon, the Starbreaker cannon, was primed, a weapon strong enough to turn planets to ash. The ship's core hummed with power, charging for one final attack. Vor glared down at the entity. Burn. The cannon fired. A beam of pure destruction screamed through space, heading straight for Earth's surface. The entity raised a hand, and the attack stopped. The superweapon, the might of the Selvar Empire, was absorbed, devoured like a drop of water in an endless ocean. The entity's form shifted. It was growing, feeding. Vor's heart pounded. For the first time in his life, he felt something he had never known before. Dread. Supreme Commander Vor had faced death before, but never like this. The void-born entity, the thing they had awakened, had absorbed the full power of the Starbreaker cannon like it was nothing. The Excelvar's most devastating weapon had not just failed, it had been consumed. And now, the thing was growing. Its towering, shifting form twisted in the darkness, stretching higher than the warships, tendrils of black mist reaching into space, pulling at the remaining fleet. Vor turned to his officers, his voice sharp. "All ships, retreat. Get out of orbit." Pilots desperately tried to break free, but their ships weren't moving. Something held them. The entity raised its hands, and suddenly, the Selvar fleet, thousands of warships, froze in place. A crushing force wrapped around each vessel, pressing down as if the very space around them had turned against them. On the bridge, Vor's officers screamed as their bodies twisted, some thrown into the air, others collapsing as if their bones had turned to dust. The ship itself was dying. The walls groaned as metal buckled inward, pulled by an invisible force. Vor stumbled forward, trying to keep his balance, trying to think. Then, the whispers returned, louder, inside his skull. "You came to take this world. Now you will take its place." Vor's vision blurred. He saw flashes, images of planets, of ancient battles, of civilizations erased by this thing. It had been locked away on Earth, hidden beneath the surface for countless millennia. Now it was free. And it was hungry. A warship on the right flank crushed inward like a tin can, its engines flickering before the entire ship disappeared into nothingness. Another vessel imploded, pulled into the ever-growing void. Vor forced himself to move. He had to do something. If he could just. The entity turned its faceless gaze toward him, and Vor felt it inside his mind. The last thing he saw was darkness swallowing the stars. The Selvar fleet was gone. Once, 10,000 warships had filled Earth's orbit, ready to claim the planet for their empire. Now only a handful remained, crippled, barely functioning, and fleeing in terror. Supreme Commander Vor was not among them. He had vanished along with the rest, consumed by the entity that had awakened beneath Earth's surface. Among the survivors was Captain Selvarn, the commander of a damaged scout ship. He had watched in horror as the fleet, his people, were erased. Only his ship remained operational, its engines barely holding together. The entity, the devourer, had turned away from him, as if he wasn't worth its attention. And so, he fled. He pushed his ship to its limits, breaking free of Earth's gravity, racing away faster than light. But even as he escaped, he felt it. A presence, watching, as if the devourer allowed him to leave, as if it wanted him to deliver a message. The moment he reached the Selvar homeworld, he collapsed onto the floor of the War Council's chamber. His body was shaking, his golden skin pale. "They're gone," he whispered. "The entire fleet, destroyed." The Selvar High Lords stared in disbelief. "By the humans," one of them asked. Captain Selvarn slowly shook his head. "No." His voice trembled. "Not humans. Not a weapon. Not an army." He swallowed hard, his mind still haunted by the last thing he saw. Something else lives on that planet. The chamber fell silent. For the first time in Selvar history, they would not seek revenge. They would never return to Earth, and they would pray that Earth would never come for them.